Hey everybody, this is Rustin with Metalholic Magazine and Mojo Radio, and with us tonight from Portugal's Moonspell, drummer, phenomenal drummer by the way, Miguel Mike Gaspar. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. How everybody doing?
We're doing wonderful over here, and of course we want to get you guys over here to perform stuff from the new album, Alpha Noir, Omega White. And unfortunately for us over here, we've only really gotten to hear Alpha Noir so far. You guys did this double album, but they really only gave us half of it so far. So what's the deal with the album and getting all of it to the States?
Well, Alpha Noir, I think, was the only album that was sponsored by Napalm Records. The only one that they gave, for people to start doing reviews. Omega White is an album that they tried to keep secret, and something more to explore, when you actually, get the double edition. It's a way of the band of, giving something back to the fans. It's all original music. It's a double album, like I said. But we based most of our, effort and energy in the first album, Alpha Noir, being the more heavy metal and more darker album. That's where we actually, thrive to do, better than Night Eternal, being a more, focused album in that direction, going back more into the past, remembering bands back in the 80s and early 90s. I think the reason that you only had access to that first album was also to keep it more of a secret, and also to keep people excited and wanting to actually, get the edition and wait for the release date. The release date here in Europe was yesterday. So, unfortunately in the States it's only on the 8th of May, and they haven't had a chance yet to listen to both albums. But if you listen to the first album, I think you already have a notion of where we're coming from and where we want to go with this new time for Moonspell.
Right. Well, and the split pair is sort of the yin and yang, or sort of an auditory bipolar thing. You do have the darker, the heavier stuff on Alpha Noir, which is one of your best albums in years, I think. But Omega White is more, I don't know, atmospheric, would you say? It's almost, it's got a lot of a typo negative vibe to it, if you will.
Well, yes, Moonspell, if you know us for many years now, we've been struggling with these two genres, the metal and the more gothic rock influence that we've had over the years. And something that made us pretty successful back in the 90s, albums like Irreligious, where it was it was pretty exciting for the times to have this new style of music that people weren't so accustomed to. But to hear Sisters of Mercy and Fields of the Nephilim, or even older stuff, coming from those more dark gothic genres, and to put a metal tone to it and bringing it with deep vocals and crunchy guitars and more extreme drums. So for us, it's always been about finding the perfection and finding the good balance between these two worlds. And this being our 9th release, like I said, we were really struggling. Where are we going to go next? How should we, come up with the best way to get the best out of us as musicians, as people? Everything that's behind lyrically. Fernando really elaborated each time more on the lyrics, making them each time catchier and more precise, even with the singing. Trying to have these two contrasts. It's not easy to go from growls and screams to lyrical vocals and things that are much quieter and sweeter. It's not something that you see most vocalists doing these days. And us as musicians, you also want to bring those dynamics, very well balanced in between. So to have the freedom to actually just write one album, just thinking about, extreme metal or all the heavy bands that influenced us growing up as teenagers, it was really exciting and gave us, we didn't have an anchor anymore. It's kind of we would start a song and get as heavy, get into these powerful riffs, then we would go a little bit more melodic, and sometimes we felt like we would lose, that drive of the songs. So actually the idea just came up of us having a method of how to get the best out of ourselves, in the rehearsal room. So we just started writing songs that would be on the A-list, which would be Alpha Noir, and songs that would remind us of, like you said, Typo Negative. This was a big influential band on Moonspell. We've been listening Typo Negative ever since Moonspell started, and we got to tour with them. We got to become friends. We went through also the tragic death of Peter Steele, which also touched us immensely. Right. And to be able to do an album, it's like giving back. It's everything that was good for us. In our hard times, those depressive days that everyone has. To get this feelings out and to be able to put it on a whole album, we had never actually done, because we were always afraid of not delivering to the fans an album that would not be metal anymore. We've gone through this also in the past with other albums, like if you think of Sin Pecado or Butterfly Effects, we were exploring a lot. In some of our early days and our early influences coming from black metal and death metal and thrash were no longer there, so present. So we didn't want to make that same mistake. So we really just took the freedom of writing as many songs as we could. And we didn't even think if a record company would actually go into this crazy adventure and wanting to release a double album. We didn't even know how it was going to come out. If Alpha Noir would come out first, then Omega Lights would come out later. Was this going to be confusing for the fans? And so we just decided, we're just going to continue doing this and do it the best that we can. We're going to record both albums, and then we'll see. And fortunately, Napalm loved the idea, and we just decided to offer the second album. It's really a tribute to everything that's been most amazing and fantastic in our lives.
Right, and again, both sides of it turned out very well. Now, you guys have worked with Tu Madsen as producer and mixer on the last several albums. What is it about that relationship that works so well for you guys?
Well, for us, coming from Portugal, it's always been a necessity to search for other studios outside of Portugal and producers. Fortunately, we've done many albums. We've been to many different countries, from Germany to England to Finland. We've worked with the best studios in our genre and producers. We've learned a lot with it, and we've made our own studio here in Lisbon, which permits us to record and rehearse, anytime that we want. We actually rehearse almost every day, be it for tours, special shows, or albums. We try to keep this continuing, so we don't lose most of the momentum and also our inspiration. So what we really were looking for would be a guy that would be able to take everything that we wanted and make it hearable on an album, that every element would have its own space and be very well balanced in the mix, and also the human factor, to have somebody that makes us feel like at home and not so nervous in the studio, and be more relaxed and understand where we're coming from, and make that experience the best that it can. In the past we've gone through a lot of the different producers and studios, like I said, and sometimes it's not like they were our buddies, let's say, like really pushing for us. And that's what I feel with Tu. That's like the key word. He's like a true friend. He really wants to get the best drum sound he can. For me, he wants to get the best guitar sound he can for Ricardo. He wants Fernando to feel, very comfortable and to be able to, go as crazy as he wants to. So we really developed a strong relationship, and he knows what we want. We did Night Eternal with him. We did the re-recordings of the Moonspell, which was the first experience with him, and then we knew that he was our man. After that, since we're so, have such a nice relationship, we decided to do most of the recordings actually in Portugal, besides the drums. I'm the only one that went to Denmark in two separate occasions, where I first did Alpha Noir with the big drum kit. He has a home studio, and he has an indoor pool. Where, of course, there was no water, and that's where we recorded the drums. So he has also this same feeling that we have of recording things like they did back in the 70s. Like if you remember stories like of Led Zeppelin with John Bonham, where they have these big, huge rooms full of reverb, and it was all natural. So he's really into this, but at the same time, he does extreme music. He does from core metal to death metal to all kinds of different genres, and he can put it all in the mix. Sometimes we would try lots of big sounds, and it wouldn't work in the end. And sometimes things would get watery or get confusing, and you wouldn't get that punch in the face, that you like it. And he's able to bring these worlds together, and I think it has to do with his own experience also in music. He's really talented, and he's very humble, and he does the best It's not like I'm the producer and you're going to go my way. He really tries to bring the magic out of each band that he works with.
Absolutely. Now, so he actually puts your kit down inside an empty swimming pool?
Mm-hmm. He sure did. It was something that he was very excited about. The previous albums, we rented studios in Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
Some were like traditional old wooden studios. I tried one which had a pretty nice room for Under the Moonspell. Then we did another one where the room was really tight, and each time I was playing, like you could see him on his desk, like wobbling and jumping up and down each time I hit the double bass drums. So that was like a really intense recording, but that's what we were going for Night Eternal. But with this album, like he started looking at his pool, and he's like, I don't use this anymore. It was just had like old boxes and storage that he would put there. So he decided to make it into a drum room, and the sound in there, as you can imagine, is amazing. Everything's so big. Coming from my rehearsal place in my studio, playing drums on my kit, and when I got there, everything was like it was more difficult to execute, because the sound was so big, so I had to count on that. So I actually made even certain ideas that I had initially simpler, just so I could, respect that sound and space and make the songs bigger and grander and more epic. And that's really in the spirit of, I think, of the old days. I'm just trying to bring that back.
So, and bring it back you guys did. Now, for you as a drummer, let's go back, because you and Fernando have been in this Moonspell thing now for like 23 years. You're coming up on a quarter century. But for you, starting out, was there a moment that you sort of just knew, hey, this is what I want to do, I want to play drums? What brought you to that point, and then who were sort of your influences early on?
Well, I had a different experience from the rest of the Moonspell members, because I was actually brought up in the States. I was from New England, and I moved to Portugal when I was only 12.
Wow.
But until then, I was already a huge hard rock fan. So I had lots of tapes of Van Halen, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, you name it, from the 80s, Cinderella, Poison, Iron Maiden. I listened to everything I could get my hands on. And I already had that, thing about the drums. I did drum corps in school in America.
Uh-huh.
So I auditioned for some like bands, like marching bands, and that's where it actually started for me. I remember my first lessons through school with my marching band teacher. And on my last day, he knew I was moving back to Portugal, and I would only have snare drum rudiment exercises. So since he knew I loved the drums so much, they gave me a special lesson, and he just used like a chair, like a stool, and just told me that my leg would be the bass drum. And he showed me my first rock beat, and that stayed till today. So when I moved to Portugal when I was 12, I already came looking for a band. And when I was 13, I was already jamming with older kids, Metallica covers and Megadeth covers, nice. All the stuff that was going on. Because I was the youngest, I was only 13, but there were no drummers around, and not many actually owned the drum kit. So I didn't even play that well at the time. But since I had a lot of excitement, and I had I really wanted to spend my weekends practicing, immediately I started playing with bands. In my first death metal band, I was actually 14, which was a band called Decade. And they released actually one of the best black metal albums, later on with a good friend of mine that substituted me years after. But actually it was through them that I met the guys from Moonspell, which was called previously Morbid God. This was back in '92, and I was 16. And at 16, I already had been through like 2 or 3 bands, and I was still searching for the band that would complete me. And not in terms of like major success, because I was in Portugal and that was not on my mind. That was like impossible. That was just like a little kid's dream, still coming back from the States, that would ever happen. But in reality, I met Fernando, and they were looking for a drummer to record the first promo track actually from Morbid God, because the drummer for some reason had disappeared. They didn't know where he had gone. And I had just joking to my friends, well, I'll go there and I'll record it. I'll help the guys out, no problem. But unfortunately, that guy came back and he did that one track, which is called Serpent Angel, our first promo track from Morbid God. But things didn't work out with him at the time because he wasn't that good of a drummer, and he wasn't wanting to put in the time and effort. So they did an audition with me, and I did this cover from Countess Bathory from Venom.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I remember Fernando was pretty impressed because I could play double bass drums. And not many kids at that time here in Portugal, could do it. And about that, I'm the best double bass drummer from my time. But I would give it always my best and always try to reproduce what I used to listen, with a lot of enthusiasm. So we started rehearsing immediately in this small place, hometown from Fernando, and we did our first demo, and the rest is, is history. We got our first deal with the Apostle Records from France, and then we went into Century Media for a 6-album contract that lasted for 10 years. So it was all very quick after that, and the dream actually became the profession, and I didn't have that much time to assimilate that or to go through what I was feeling at the time. But I definitely knew that it was something special since that first day that we met, and everything else. Ricardo and Pedro, they came in the band in 94, 95, like 2 or 3 years after, and it just made it so much more complete. And we've done everything, playing live, doing albums, DVDs. It's just been one big circus ever since, and I don't think I could be happier.
With the exception of the bass position, you guys have maintained a pretty steady lineup for 2 decades, which is really impressive in this day and age. But, and I have to ask you, going from growing up in New England here in the States to going back over to Portugal and everything, what was that like as a teenager, going from, the American background and going over to Portugal and living there and everything and growing up?
Well, as a teenager would put it, it sucked. For the time, it was very difficult because, so you can understand, growing up in the States, I had access to everything, especially when it came to music. So I was used to just going to my local, record store, and I could just get, if I had the money for it, if my parents would give me the money for it, I could get, the albums that I liked. I could buy magazines like Hit Parade or Circus. I remember I even had like I used to sign it. I used to get it at home, and this was all at a very young age. So I was very passionate already for music, and I had MTV and Movie Channel, HBO, all these channels. I used to play baseball, and it was just a typical American kid, I guess. But when I came to Portugal, all this was non-existent. Especially music. To find albums in the '80s in Portugal was very difficult. They all had to be ordered, or you had to have a friend that would come from England or the States to visit and would bring something for you. Because Portugal had very hard times until '74, because there was a dictatorship here in Portugal. So people didn't have the freedom that we had in the States, and I would get this from my parents, but getting brought up in the States, it's not something that I understood. It was something that I thought that was like Portuguese, but that was from their culture. And only coming here and actually experiencing it when I started to understand it. And so people that really loved music here, they had, to record from radio stations. You didn't have the internet back then, so you always had to wait until there was that special program that played that one album that you wanted to record, and you would stay up all night to record that album. So there was a lot of effort to have music, and as a kid that wasn't normal for me. So it was very bizarre to come to a country where I couldn't just get the music that I wanted, and also like turning on the TV. At the time there was only 2 channels, I think. There wasn't much to do, and I couldn't play baseball because Europe is completely all about soccer. So I was a bit alienated, and I was completely I didn't know really what was going to be my future. All I thought of was going back to the States. But when I started at 13, meeting these older kids that like bands like Metallica and Sepultura and, Judas Priest and all these Iron Maiden, especially Iron Maiden was huge in the 80s in Portugal. And Iron Maiden was the first couple of bands that would have a tradition to play here, actually near where I ended up living, which is called Cascais. Right. Which is like 20 minutes out of Lisbon. And people would come all over Portugal and even Spain in like islands, just to see Iron Maiden. And that was one of my first shows. I was like 13 or 14. And after that, things started to change a lot in Portugal. There started to be more opportunities. I started to feel, more accustomed to the Portuguese ways. And it wasn't easy. You really had to, struggle, to buy instruments, to find a rehearsal place, to find the right people that would commit themselves in their time and not go out with their girlfriends, Friday night and want to rehearse. But that wasn't, that easy. So I was very lucky to find the right people that made me, fall in love, with my parents, homeland and their culture. And it's funny coming from the States where there are so many bands every day, and not everybody has an opportunity like I've had, and it happened to me, through Portugal, and we're till today still the only metal band that has some kind of career internationally. So it's I probably, if I would have stayed in the States, it might not have even happened. And sometimes things that you never expect and it's going to be like the worst time of your life actually can become the best time of your life.
What is that? Every time a door is closed, a window opens somewhere. So. But,
yeah, that's how it's been with us. We've had like a lot of obstacles, and cause it's not like Sweden or like Germany or England. People are used to hard rock or metal and musicians, especially like traveling through the airports. With us here in Portugal, it's kind of like everybody doesn't know what to do or what to say, and there's all these restrictions, and they're just not so used to handling like a situation like us. When it comes, like, imagine we want to send our equipment, to Germany, or we're traveling with, all these guitars and cymbals, and they're always asking us, at the desk, if we're going to declare it and how much it costs. If we were like a soccer player, they wouldn't bother us so much.
There you go. You should just be a soccer team with a side project of being in a band, right?
Yeah, that would work wonders for you, that's for sure. Soccer is everything.
So before we get out of here, then, I have to ask you, because we're working on our top drummers article for 2012, like the last 30 years or so. What drummers do you, if any, emulate, or do you really aspire to, or that really impress you?
Well, growing up, Alex Van Halen was definitely one of the best drummers ever. And I think he influenced so many bands from the hard rock to metal. Some people might not even know it. A lot of people always talk about Tommy Lee. I'm also a huge Tommy Lee fan from Motley Crue. But if you think of it, and if you listen to the Van Halen albums, and you listen to his drumming, he was pretty ahead of the time. And I think, he brought a lot of power to hard rock, and also making drums interesting. And he would use like patterns, that would come from other styles of music, and he would bring all that massive power into it, and it would work. And I think that influenced me definitely a lot. Coming into more extreme drummers, like growing up, when I got in my teenage years, I would listen to like Pete Sandoval from Morbid Angel,
right.
Of course Dave Lombardo from Slayer, Gene Hoglan, that was in Death, and Strapping in the Lad. These drummers were like another level. They were playing really fast, but still with a lot of heart, and a lot of emotion, and it always, making it more difficult to become a drummer, because they were doing like just simply amazing stuff. So I think I live a lot off of these two, worlds, the hard rock and the more extreme metal. Also, drummers like Danny Carey from Tool. When A&E came out, like I couldn't believe it that you could actually play like that and sound like that. So definitely these drummers. Vinnie Paul from Pantera, for sure, it has been a huge influence on me. I just love it, all his drum parts to death. And it was one of my first shows I actually saw as a kid also. It was Pantera, Annihilator, and Judas Priest. And they were with the Cowboys from Hell album. And I remember being in the front row, like 13, 14, and seeing those huge bass drums with those huge toms. Like, I had never seen nothing like that, and somebody sounds so powerful. And to be able to listen to that on an album and listen to that on live and even be more impressive, and having all that showmanship is really what, I think inspired me the most. Because sometimes you hear great albums and then they just don't cut it live. And I think that's like what makes you or breaks you. You know, and that's always been a bit of also Moonspell's philosophy. We've always learned almost everything that we know today, you know, playing live and touring. So these drummers that, you know, sweated and bled, you know, for the music, you know, we really have to honor them for doing what they did.
Absolutely. Miguel Gaspar of Moonspell, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. The new album, Alpha Noir, Omega White, great album. For those of you anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, get your hand on both sides of it, because really, the one emphasizes the other in my mind. It really brings out more from the other one when you hear both of them. So
it's like the perfect date.
Exactly. There you go. Miguel, again, thanks so much. We look forward to hopefully getting you guys over here.
Every album we have to go to the States. At least 1 or 2 tours. We really, you know, it's important for us, you know, to keep that connection with the fans.